Okay, so um, welcome to this conversation. My name is Janet Fuentes. I'm from Providence Community Library, and this event is part of La Feria del Libro y las Artes de Providence 2021. This is a bilingual fair in celebration of Hispanic culture and of National Hispanic Heritage Month, and which features Latino, Latina, and Latinx artists, performers, and writers from our local Providence and Rhode Island communities and beyond. Feria Prov 21 is presented by Providence Community Library and Providence College, with event partners Rhode Island Center for the Book, Rhode Island Latino Arts, and Pawtucket Public Library. This event is made possible in part by a grant from the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts, through an appropriation by the Rhode Island General Assembly, and a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, as well as a grant from City of Providence Department of Arts, Culture, and Tourism. To find out more about Feria Prov 21 events, go to the Providence Community Library website, provcomlib.org. /Feria Prov 21 or the Facebook page at Feria Prov 21. So tonight's presentation is all about the Providence Children's Film Festival Cine Español 2021 reel, which was kindly provided to us by the Providence Children's Film Festival for screening during our own fair. So it's a curated selection of 6 short children's films from Spanish-speaking countries. And with us tonight to talk about the reel and talk about the filmmaking involved is Eric Bilodeau. I hope I got your name right, Eric. Yep. Who has a vast experience of cinema programming and exhibition. He was director of programming. I beg your pardon. He ran Providence's cable car cinema for 18 years. He was director of programming for the Newport International Film Festival before joining the Providence Children's Film Festival in 2010. Eric is also the children's film programmer for the Martha's Vineyard Film Festival and a festival advisor for the International Kids Film Festival of India. Also joining us as a co-presenter tonight is Karina Veras, who is Mount Pleasant Library's Youth Services Librarian, or one of the Youth Services Librarians there. Apart from being a librarian with a master's degree, she has a BA in psychology, is bilingual in English and Spanish, maybe other languages, I don't know, you can advise us, Karina. And also, all importantly, is a film buff. So in order to get the conversation going, Eric, I wonder if you could say a few words about the reel and how a selection of films gets combined into a reel to be shown in a film festival like yours.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me here tonight and be able to speak to one of my favorite topics, movies, and to speak with people that share a passion for film. It's really, a festival is basically a mixed mission of going out finding films and inviting them to the film fest, and then having a submission site where people find you and they submit the films to your film festival. And then you watch with a jury and discuss and debate. A lot of disagreement can go on, and in the end, you make a decision about inviting some films and others not, mostly not invited. It's probably about a 15-18% acceptance rate from what gets accepted and found. And yeah, and then you try to find, I mean, because you don't control what you're looking for and what people submit, you're basically working with what's been created. And that's kind of a fun thing about it, is that some years certain themes are stronger represented than other years. Sometimes certain countries submit more films. Lately, Iran is like off the charts submitting films from Iran. And so I came up with an Iranian reel the last year for the first time. And France is always big in submitting films, French film production companies and filmmakers. So, and I must admit that this film was put together based on two criteria: that it was a Spanish language film or Spanish produced film in a country that was primarily spoke Spanish, and that it was a film that would not be detrimental to any child watching at any age. They may not understand or comprehend some of the narratives in each of the films, but at least there's nothing of violence or sexual content or something. So that made it an all ages film. And if you can read subtitles, then we made it an all ages. Otherwise, we made it 8+, because if you were not a Spanish language speaker, we thought you needed to be in the loop and being literate with reading English. So so that's how a reel like this comes about. And this was and then titling it was something of Cine Español. I'm not sure. I'd love somebody's feedback on that, if that's kind of a goofy title from a Spanish speaker's point of view, because that was one of my just wordplay type things of mixing cinema with Spanish. And then and here you have it. And we brought it to the film fest, and it was pretty well attended, actually. I think partly because there are a lot of schools out there that might want to have students watching a Spanish language film, but also it complements other programming like this event that you're having this week. Did I nail all your point or your question?
Well, I think you did, Erica.
Okay.
So I'm just interested then if you can go on and tell us if you had any sort of underlying themes in mind that were you wanted to bring out through this particular selection.
So that's the trap you never want to fall down. You never want to say, all right, we're going to do a thematic reel this year, and it's all going to be about bullying, or it's all going to be about gender identity. Because then once you get yourself locked into that box, you go, okay, now you end up, and this I found out the hard way, you end up compromising the quality of film in order to make it thematically fit the reel that you're trying to compose. And so, no, it's not that there was a theme already decided upon, let's go find that film. It was much more the other way around. Here's a film that's very well made and intriguing in some way. What might it share with this film that's intriguing? And then, so do they fit well together or not? And yeah, and sometimes it's very, very rudimentary connections. And I think this reel is one of them, because you have animation, live action, it's really a whole mix, an integration of animation, live action. So it's not even film style or film technique that makes this reel cohesive. It is the language spoken / it's interesting. I mean, you can watch a film like Shemai in the Storm, and or if that's how it's pronounced, actually, I don't even know, because it's a silent film. There's nothing really spoken in the film, and yet I get a sense of Argentinian culture, or maybe a character that is prevalent in Latin American lore, as far as what a medicine woman or medicine man is, and just trying to the natural sounds that are used in the environmental sounds that are used in the reel are I assume are native. And so you learn something even through an animated film about a culture and about what the stories may be popular in that culture or very important to that culture. So, but that's so I didn't start with a theme. We start with what's good out there as a film, what speaks to us, what's well made, and what challenges kids, because we're not here to entertain. I'll be the first one to say, you want to go get entertained, go watch another Pixar film, and by the time it's over, you might be buying a download MP4, and you might be buying a Happy Meal somewhere with the character that's on the box. That's fine, go do that. But we're trying to find the films that might stay with you a little bit, confuse you, and to really make you think, just stop and think, and perhaps offer some wisdom to handle a real true life situation that you might encounter as you get older, and or even as a child. The film with the Maria Camilla's Gift was beautiful in a way of how she's dealing with her brother having cancer and trying to break bring some happiness to his afternoon once at the hospital. And yet that's a very serious situation. Here's a boy that's, has a deadly disease, and if you stay towards the end, you get to realize that he really was that in that situation, and so that made it even more real and more. I thought more hit the heartstrings harder there, but yeah. Sorry, I think I could keep talking, but I don't want to keep talking. Sorry, but I'm happy to answer if I didn't get it.
So I like what you spoke about when it pertains to overlapping themes in movies, even though all 6 shorts vary in subjects. So I've also noticed that in Maria Camila's Gift and in Wild Leah, they have a similar theme of people or in Wild Leah's case, animals or objects fulfilling acts in service of others. So I was wondering if there were other themes that you noticed that the 6 shorts shared. And like you said, it wasn't on purpose, but it seems like it was kismet that some of the themes did overlap. And I was wondering what your observations were.
Isn't that beautiful that serendipitously these themes do overlap, and that kindness and empathy really resonate with filmmakers across the board. You've got an estranged son in Crocodile from his mom, and who is basically you really feel for his situation, not knowing his parents, excuse me. And then you've got a toilet paper character trying to assist in the animated film and trying to help a boy who's fallen off the cliff, who's chasing after a cat. So I find that reassuring in a way. That's why I sometimes you can link these films up very easily, because you can just go, oh, there's another example of sympathy or empathy. There's another example of strength through weakness, or there's or persistence. A lot of films have, that whole narrative arc about, you have a problem, you got to figure it out, and how are you going to figure it out, and you come out the other end. And how did that happen? And how did it leave everyone in the end? So, but I mean, one thing that did kind of, only after rewatching these films, was that basically some of these films really conveyed the point that life is hard. Doesn't matter how old you are, life is hard. And, it's not, and it's hard for the kids, it's hard for the parents, it's hard for everybody. And you can, and I think just letting kids know life's wonderful. Don't get it wrong, but it's also, there are the times when it's hard, and how you're going to deal with that hard situation, that difficult time. And you can, you can try to make the best of it, and you can, but sometimes I think it's great just to tell kids. And I tell my son all the time, when anytime, he doesn't say it anymore, he learned, he's like, that's not fair. And I'm like, life is not fair. There's nothing fair about it. And you're going to witness this again and again and again. So don't work with that premise that there's some kind of fairness, I don't know, quality to life. Life is very unfair, and how you deal with those unfair aspects really defines your character and how much you care about others. And that kind of touches upon the multiple films in this reel really show the power of kindness and empathy. And that when you really, the person that expresses that kindness or shows empathy is empowered by it, is made stronger by it. And it's not a saccharine, sticky, just being sweet type of thing. It's from the heart, and it's just a human condition of, I see you're in trouble and I want to help, and it could be 2 animated characters in Blue and Malone who want to help the woman who's now an adult, who's forgotten what it's like to look at life through a child's eyes. I think that's what a great point to bring out and say, don't ever lose try not to lose. I mean, it's hard not to. Try not to lose that perspective you had as a child when you looked at things, because when you looked at things back then, so many things were new, and you left your mind open to interpretation of those things or those people or events. And so I think that was a super valuable lesson that transcended through Blue and Malone, but also through the other films is that a child's perspective is an important one, and don't underestimate it, and try not to lose your own. Later on in life, try to stop and slow down, and just really, and this pandemic is kind of, teaching people that a little bit more, unfortunately, due to the circumstances. But yeah, it's really, I think that multiple films here had a good point of just kind of saying, try not to lose your perspective of a child as you were a child, and also to empathize with children that you're dealing with. So
Eric, out of these movies, obviously these are all from Latin American countries. So what are the hallmarks of cinema from that part of the world?
Well, two of them are from Spain.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yeah. Blue and Malone and Crocodile are from Spain. And I think you can kind of tell that they're a little bit more polished. They're a little bit more, they're urban. I don't know if that could just be because there's large urban centers in Latin America for sure, and then just as large as in Spain. But the one thing I noticed is with the Latin American films, the environmental sounds that they were captured played a much more prevalent role in the narrative. You really got the sense in Wild Lee, you heard the jungles, and the same with the size of things, with the boy walking through the field, and I think they turned up the volume of the environment in order to accentuate where you are, the sense of place. You are you are in a wild place that is, very intriguing, but you gotta, there's some weird stuff that can happen here. So yeah, that's one thing I've noticed in the past, but it's hard. It's a slippery road to walk down and say, well, generally Latin American films incorporate, and I will never say something idiotic like that. But in these films, there's in a very gross generalized way, there's a much more a roughness or a coarseness to the films that I've seen submitted from Latin America than I have seen coming from Spain, the country. And there's definitely I get much more urban narratives coming from Spain, not just talking about this reel. Now I can actually generalize. A lot more urban narratives come from the country of Spain, whereas a lot more rural narratives or family oriented and farming and fishing. It's much more connected to the land and to the environment submissions that come from Latin America. But that's all, there's always exceptions, and there's always, I don't mean to say that's all they do. They don't, they do the opposite too. So, but
so I know that in comparison to feature films, where sometimes it just feels like there's a lot of filler, short films can pack an emotional punch in just like 5 to 10 short minutes. So I was wondering which film resonated the most with you and why, out of the 6, or are there multiple, or did each one kind of just touch on the heartstrings a bit?
You're asking the programmer, who's your favorite kid?
I know, it's kind of like asking which one's your favorite baby.
Every film has its strengths and weaknesses, and I will say, not being a favorite film, but I'll say the least ordinary film, or the least typical film, was The Size of Things from Colombia. And basically, to me, because it challenged you it didn't follow a traditional narrative, and things were weird, and you're like, what's going on? It's almost like an experimental film in a way, and the acting was not polished at all, but so much was said through their expressions and their faces that the camera would stay on the father and the son's face for these uncomfortable periods of time, and you're like, what's that father going to blow up, or is he going to cry? I was waiting for an extended some type of emotion to come out, because they just stayed on their face with the camera. And I liked the timing of it. It had a different timing to it, and just what is up with that chair? Everyone, I just loved it when this had been screened in my jury. for the film to make it into the film festival. It bothered kids, and other kids thought it was just a cool thing. It was like a superpower to a chair, whereas other kids were going, that makes no sense. I don't understand. There's no clean cut reason why that thing is doing it. So it's really, I like that aspect of it, that it had a less linear, understandable narrative than the others. But that's not the other ones are, it is comparing apricots to walnuts, and it's just something, it's hard to, the animated film of Wild Lee is so beautiful, and just so the intermixing of live action, and it's not even live action, it's more like live scene behind it, and intermixed with stop motion animation, and making characters out of such varied objects of a roll of toilet paper and a napkin and a couch, a sofa, and I thought that movie gets so much credit for trying to expand your mind about what is a character, and how do they exhibit their traits, their personality traits, and how they're designed, or their voice acting. So yeah, and Crocodile, that brought tears to my eyes. It's just that I think, as a parent of teenagers, and this is between the mother and the son, and boy, that was just, I just found at the last minute and a half, I'm like, why am I crying? Oh my God. And I was just there, that struck something, and yet it was so, the script, or the way they handled it, not a lot of emotional content there, just that one, reference to a pet name, or a nickname that he had, and it just melted his heart, and melted her, and gave it away that she's in touch. And yeah, and that's why also I think when Janet had even mentioned, like, we're looking for children's films. We're not looking for children's films per se. Like, we're looking for films that even children could enjoy or appreciate. But most of the films, I'd say 75% of the films that maybe 65%, the filmmakers did not make the films thinking that I'm making a children's film. They just don't. They think they're making a film, and they think, oh, this would be good for kids to watch, and they'll submit it, or we find them and we're like, oh, that'd be great for kids to watch, and at least we think so. And so, but most of the films that we include, they are not thinking, oh, this is a children's film. They're thinking they're authors of a story, they're artists of a painting, and they're really not thinking, I'm going to make something for a child. And then there's the 35% that do have that in mind, and they're like, oh, I know, I want to teach my kids and others, this was a really great story that my kids liked, and I want to share it with other kids. And you can see that sometimes in the way that their film is made. But most of the films we show are not made as kids films. They're films that are even kids could get something out of. So yeah. And what would you, so Karina, Gianna had said that you're a movie buff. But so a kid comes into Mount Pleasant Library and goes, all right, I want a Spanish language film. Like, what do you get to suggest for a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old kid that is, in their native tongue, and they can understand it without, any interpretation through the way our society filters it?
So I shouldn't admit to this, but I'm not as well versed in children's films, which is really sad, admitting this as a youth services librarian. But the last children's film that I did enjoy and tugged at my heartstrings and my emotions was Coco.
Yep.
There was one particular scene or dialogue where they were talking about just current living people just living long enough where once they pass away, or generations keep passing away, no one alive will remember them. And in my mind, I was like, no, I don't think a child will understand this until they get older. And I feel like a lot of the shorts were that way as well, where there's just concept and themes where maybe a child won't resonate with it at their young age,
Yep.
but as they get older, hopefully they'll rewatch them and just experience it anew, and pick up on things that they didn't pick up on when they were a kid.
Right.
Yeah, a lot. I really enjoyed all of the shorts that you selected.
And even the Coco, I thought of Coco when I was watching Blue and Malone, because there was when they couldn't convince Berta to basically see from a child's perspective again, like she didn't need her fantasy friends anymore. And that was existential, it seemed to me, to those two characters, to the blue cat and to Manton, or I forget the cat's name, the not cat, whatever the small character's name was. It seemed to infer in the narrative that if they're no longer needed, if they're no longer seen by the person who came up with this imaginative friend, like they might, they ask themselves in the film, they're like, what happens? I don't know. Where do I go now? I don't know. Maybe it's their time that they no longer exist, because if the woman's going to give up her childhood fantasy friends, then they are not going to be there anymore. And I go, my God, that's just like Coco. With Coco, it's that whole thing about remember me, bring my photo back, have them remember me, as some people are not getting forgotten about and they're getting dusted away. But Coco is great. I mean, I that is one of the films that most requested ones that I show during the summer at outdoor screenings. That is a very, I think, it's such a high polished Western produced film, but I think it's really true to, I really feel like I'm watching a Mexican produced film or something that is not my own culture, and of a mixed culture. It's really, I think it's really well done. But what film, and so never mind Spanish language, what film as a child affected you when this is one of these points I love asking people these questions, and they say, because I can name 3 or 4 films when I was growing up that I saw something that didn't fit the normal mold. It just, something was, whoa, what was that? And it could be something very, commercially and goofy, and I watched Grease and there were a lot of things I didn't understand or whatever. But or Jaws, like I was terrified of sharks, and I shouldn't be. And that's such a stupid movie it's a great movie, but it's a stupid one to base your knowledge of sharks on. So it's, I don't know. So I feel a special responsibility as a programmer not to mess up with a kid, with bringing something to the table and to a young mind, and potentially putting it in front of them and say, watch and listen, and then doing harm, right? Or doing, like, that doesn't mean I don't want to show a scary film, or I don't want to show a film that is upsetting. Those can be very powerful and helpful films, but there are films that I feel that can, you got to be careful, because you can do damage. Lasting damage can stay for, in a child's mind into your adulthood. Like I said, the monkeys from Wizard of Oz still haunt me. I mean, there's things that stay with you. And so, programming for children is another and I'm saying this because you being as a library resource person, and somebody comes to you and says, hey, can you suggest something? With books as well, I'm sure you got to be careful, like, how old are you? And what are do I know your parents? Yeah, let me think here. So,
that is something that happens all the time.
Sorry, we've got a question a question and comment in the chat.
Sorry.
If M here would like to speak for themselves, they're welcome to, if they want to unmute themselves and ask the question, please do. Otherwise, I can speak for them. The question is, how could we get films like these in our libraries to have them available for kids who come in? Distribution is always an issue with materials from other countries. So that's the question. How would we be able to get hold?
Support your local film fest. I
Oh,
mean,
well,
really,
I think for a library, for example.
well, for a library. So
Yeah.
interestingly enough, many of these films become put online after a certain period of time. It's something. It's weird. The filmmakers will be really adamant about, you know, you can only show it at a festival, and it has to be a screening, and it can't be online, and it can't be, and you negotiate terms, and you're like, okay, all right, I can show it twice, and I have to be, you know, don't dare put it online. And then 2 years later, it'll be on YouTube, and I'm like, what is all this fuss about? You know, my film is an artwork, and I don't, you know, you try to honor the theme, I don't know, whatever their passion about, you know, really making it an exclusive thing. But I gotta say that a lot of these films eventually make it online if you're patient enough. And then what I've been doing, and I know this because I've been doing this going into my 14th year, our 13th film fest, but our 14th year putting together a film fest. So I do know that many of the films I say are not available and originally become very much, I'd say 75% of the films we've shown for shorts become available online. And some of them might be pay-per-view, or maybe a Vimeo $1.95, something like that. But most of them, I find them later on and go, oh, good, they're in the public domain. So I can just let that person know, you know, they were wondering, how can I use this film for, you know, depicting styles of animation or some type of film? And then I go back and I see these things. I go, oh, it's already in the public domain. So. And a lot of them, it's funny, all it takes is for a teaching, a school or an institute or somebody that saw great value in the film. There was one film we had last year, and it won the Children's Hospital Jury Award. And it was an animated film that was really beautiful. And it just basically dealt with a homeless girl on the street. And she meets the person she's trying to rip the purse off of her shoulder. She's trying to steal from this woman, and the woman fights back by not releasing the purse. And she says, "I'll give it to you if you promise to plant. If you promise to do." It was a little bit ambiguous. And so she's finally gave the purse up, said, "I promise." And she gave the purse up. She opened up the purse, and it was full of acorns. And so she started like, what was that woman talking about? And so she ended up going around the city and planting acorns in different parts of the city in order to have trees to start to grow. And of course, with animation, you can say, well, time passes so quickly and now we have oak trees everywhere. But it was a really beautiful premise to build this narrative on, and to the point where it ends up improving her environment, improving her life, and then ends up being robbed by another person on the streets, and she gave up the bag only if he promises that he'll take care of them by planting them. And so the cycle continues. And I think I'm thinking of this film right now is because I gathered a bag of acorns today, and there's a spot off the highway that I'm looking to throw them into, hoping they're going to plant. And but because it's such a powerful message that you can really little things can make big differences. And that film, I went right off the tracks, and that film is now online, even though this was just released last year. It's called The Promise, and you can watch it on YouTube. And I thought that would take multiple years to get online, but no, you can actually watch that online now. But films and people say, well, you can watch it online, and why would we go to a film festival? And I'd in a heartbeat say, because watching films together, sharing films is so much better than just watching them alone on a little cell phone screen and just like, oh, look at this. No, I just watched the whole movie on myself and alone in a closet somewhere. And you're like, oh my goodness. Films are a social medium, if you ask me. Watching films together, you start to realize people see different things in the same film you're watching. And so, yeah, it's quite powerful that way. So I hopefully answered the where can you get films like this. And I gotta say, supporting your local film fest, it takes we pay money. We raise money in order to pay money to filmmakers so they can keep making films. And but by buying tickets, I attend to, I mean, that's one of the probably the perks about having the pandemic is that I've attended a lot of virtual film festivals this past year and a half that I never would have attended and could have attended. And but I, watch films in Seattle or films up in Camden, Maine, and films down in North Carolina now. And knowing full well, that thing is going to be on Amazon Prime, and I have Amazon Prime, but I'd much rather give $20 to Camden International Film Festival or whatever their ticket price is, and just because I know it supports their programming and they support filmmakers, and that makes the whole community a much healthier and more vibrant one. And you just need to see a few films to realize, and at a film festival, then you realize, oh, this is why film festivals are kind of special, because we got to watch it together. I don't know where to find stuff like that, because it takes work to find that kind of thing. And it takes investment to pay the actual filmmakers some money so they can say, good job. Here's some money to help pay off the film you just made, never mind the film you're going to make in the future. So yeah, supporting film festivals is key as well. But I know I'm tooting my own horn here. So, but
well, while you're mentioning that, before we started this recording, you were talking about the next Providence Children's Film Festival and the process of starting to recruit juries.
Oh yeah.
And so it might be good, to tell the audience who might be interested in getting involved, interested in going on a jury, and to talk about the importance of getting people from the Latino community involved in these sort of festival juries, and having a diverse jury generally.
Diverse, the more diverse, the better. And I'm not even talking just culturally, that's an obvious thing, but I'm also talking ages too. It's funny because people think it's a children's film fest and we're looking for jurors, and we are looking for jurors. If you're interested, let me get that part in case anyone's interested. If you go to our webpage and Providence Children's Film Festival.org, there's a link right there. It's a slider. I just put it up last week, and you click onto that and you'll be filled out and part of our virtual jury. You can watch things at home, and but I'm a social guy, and I will be emailing you and saying, hey, I saw that you said this about this film, and I'm curious about that. I'd like to know a little bit more why you saw that, or what else might have you seen in something. So it isn't just a complete behind the video screen, you don't talk to anybody else, because I do tend to email. I won't call you. I won't Zoom you. And so there is that kind of interaction. So if you're interested, love to have anyone of all ages. And I've been doing this for 14 years. I have jurors now that their kids are off at college. They started and their kids are off at college. My own daughter's off at college. And so the parents, I know their kids are off the jury, and the parents are like, don't take my name off. I know she went to college, but I still want to watch these films. I still want to be on the jury. And I have at least 8-10 senior citizens that do this, that are just, their grandchildren, they're watching for their grandchildren, if you ask me. And they love doing it. And I love to get their perspective on it. So it's really, the diversity of ages as well as cultures is really important for me. And so I encourage anyone to join and partake of that. And it's really, it's really an eye-opening experience, especially when we get back together again and we can watch some films together. We try to get together once a month when COVID's not around. Right now, we're not allowed to do that. And just to see faces and talk films and eat pizza. We always have free pizza. And then, and then we do most of our watching online and talk amongst ourselves. So it can be a lot of fun. It can be a lot of interesting films, but also a lot of bad films. But that's my job. Sorting through the mass of films. We get hundreds and hundreds.
I'll add the details about what you've just spoken of from your website onto our Facebook page afterwards, so that people can find it immediately.
Thank you.
So you just mentioned how it's one part of your job is sifting through some very bad films. And I know that the Providence Children's Festival does a lot with organizing and curating the film festival, but also partnering up with and collaborating with local organizations and doing year-round programming. And I was wondering, what aspects of your job do you enjoy? Which ones do you not enjoy? Obviously, watching bad films is something that you most likely do not enjoy.
Yeah, yes, and it's funny because then you'll see films that I thought, oh, that's inappropriate for a children's film festival, and then the next thing you know, you see it won up into the Boston Kids Film Festival. You're like, well, I guess they saw something different. But that's where different festivals get their own personalities, which is nice. All of a sudden, so otherwise, if every film were obvious bad, good, or then we'd all be the same film festival. So there are some film fests that do their personalities different, and that's really nice. What I love, you just named what I love about doing this work. I love connecting with communities with the themes or something or narratives that are in the film, or it could be even something, just a character in the film has Down syndrome, or the character in the film is a red hawk, or the character loves to Indian food. And then the next thing we do is we try to connect our community here to that element. And so we'll serve Indian food at the end of the screening, or we'll have a red hawk, or a bird of prey at the end of the screening, or we'll have somebody convey their experiences with having a brother who has Down syndrome, and and how they get through it, and that connection to the community is, oh my goodness, that's when that puts me over the moon, because it really makes this world a lot smaller. You start to realize, holy cow, we are so much more alike than we are unalike wherever you are in this world, and we really share so many of the similar concerns and passions that we just want to live in a healthy world, be loved by everyone, or most people around us. And we all want the best for our children, and so when you start connecting with communities, and for us, it could be anything from the Refugee Dream Center to Save the Bay to the Boys and Girls Club and the Providence Community Library. I mean, they're hosting this here, but we've been working with Providence Community Library for multiple years, and they're wonderful. I mean, I think it's a great complementary relationship, because it's storytelling, and from all different points of view, but it's a different kind of storytelling, different way of telling a story, but it's really, people are hungry that go to the library to want more perspectives and more understanding. And so I love that kind of combination. We do so many different things with organizations when there are films that make sense to do something with that. And so some years we don't, we'll have we develop a great relationship with Save the Bay, but we have nothing to do with an environmental film and water and for that year, so we don't even have anything to do with them. But the next year we do, because we had another film that has that. So once you start that relationship, it's actually, you start watching films and you start to think, as you're watching the film and you're liking it, you go, oh, I'm sure the Ghanaian drum circle women would love this one, because this is we had a great time when we had a Ghanaian film come in, and it's really and that's you get to learn. I've learned so much about my own community here in and around Southern New England that never knew existed until I got involved in film programming, and that was because I discovered them because they either contacted me or I contacted them, trying to make a connection to our own community. So yeah, it's really, that's my favorite part. And kids, working with kids that keep you young. It's incredible. I'm 57. I appreciate a child's perspective. I love the energy of children, of just it reminds me of my own energy when I was a child, but it also, there's something so optimistic and loving and brilliant about kids, and their open-mindedness and their trusting in people, and that's just, you can't be around that too much. It's just, oh my goodness. And so that is really, I do super enjoy working in that demographic. And it is the most, like Gianna had alluded to, I've been doing film programming for a long time, and a lot of different types of programs, and putting together film festivals that are certain language or a certain area of the world, or film noir or horror. And so when I was invited to program for the Children's Film Fest, I'm like, I have never programmed for children before. This should be an experience. And oh my goodness, it was the hardest programming I have ever done, and the most rewarding programming, because it's just so, once you know you've hit that sweet spot of just, oh, this really speaks to a wide range of, of ages and concerns, and because you're programming for the parents as much as you're programming for the children, because their parents aren't going to bring them. If you don't satisfy the parents, you're not going to ever get a child saying, I really want to see this movie. And, if you get the parent, you got to, that's where you start. But there are times, you push that fine line, and I've had drinks thrown at me. I've had people come up and scream at me, and how dare I, think that was for a child, and I'm like, well, let's talk about it, but most those have happened few and far between, thankfully, but I'm mindful of it. I know it's just really, I know you can't push the envelope without sometimes stepping over that little bit more, that somebody else is like, that was way too out of line. You are such an awful person for doing that. But sadly, most of the time, maybe that 6 or 7 times that's happened to me in the last 14 years, they won't talk with me. They'll walk away. They'll have an outburst and walk away. And so I don't get to really understand what it is that they have bothered them. And but that's out there, and that's, you gotta walk that line, and otherwise it just turns into boring, stale programming that anyone can do. Oh, that's safe. Like, they just look at who's putting it out. Disney. Oh, all right, we'll do that. It's like you're just doing it by just the name of the company, and you're like, I don't want to. That's not my kind of programming. And you can find Disney and Pixar everywhere. I'm trying to find the stuff, esoteric stuff that's, oh no, you can't just find this. You have to go look for it. And so I'm looking for you. So there you go.
Eric, do you find it a problem with kids who may have been brought up on a solid diet of like Marvel superhero blockbusters, that they would come to a film festival and see shorts that were made on a much more limited budget, that didn't have all the high tech and bells and whistles involved? Do you find that's how do they respond to that when they're seeing that kind of movie for the first time?
I don't know. I'm going to say the short answer is I don't know. I don't know how much. I do know that the Marvel films tend to go for the tween into teen years, and I know that one thing I've just kind of thrown my hands up a little bit when it comes to programming, but not as much as I used to, is chase the teen market a little bit. I like to say that every year I want to have something that speaks to teens in order to provide programming so all age ranges are satisfied, because that's the one that the commercial market's really marketing to, and they are really, the next Black Widow, the next Hulk, they are really trying to get those kids into a cinema with $10 popcorns and $20 Cokes, and they're tough. That it is a tougher demographic for that PG-13 crowd. That being said, there are films that have been very successful with our teen crowds, and I find that it's when you cover a topic that they're interested in. Gender identity, holy moly, I had no idea until I got a whole influx in the last 3-4 years of gender identity narratives that you just know what's on. Basically, what people are submitting is the canary in the coal mine of what people are thinking in society. And out of nowhere, I had no gender identity films one year, and then the next year I've got 17, 18, and going, what's happening here? Like, this is what's on society's mind now. And they're like, okay, well, we need to pay attention to this. Or I think we should pay attention because people are kind of curious about that. And so we'll get a film and a Just Charlie, which was unbelievable. I want to think the year we thought about love, and it's dealing with teen relationships. And so those have become very popular. We were able to do very well with those, with the teen crowd that, and the crowd that does go to Marvel films. I think because those Marvel films are not going to answer those questions, and those documentaries that we did bring in, well, one was a narrative. No, I brought in multiple, but documentaries and narratives, fictional narratives. They really cover topics that are somewhat taboo. The major market players don't want to touch those topics because there's, we gotta play this down south, and we got to play this out west and up north, and everywhere we play this is not going to be well received, and so they tend to shy away from it. So if a topic is serious enough, we do well with teen films, and we are able to distract them from the blockbustery thing, or the latest vampire film, or some hellbender film or something like that, and which I find reassuring, because there's entertainment, and I love the Marvel film. I get into it. I like it. I like getting my blasted ears away, and it's all eye candy and ear candy. And like, oh my goodness, don't ask. The next day, don't ask me what the storyline was. I'll be like, what was the story again? I don't know. I'm just so stimulated that I forget the story. And you really can. A topic that speaks to those, what they're thinking about during those ages, can really gather their attention and take them in, and oh yeah, we've had some fantastic films that resonated with them. So sorry, that was a little long. It's my favorite topic.
Maybe this might be the final question, since we're almost
Sure.
So to go back to what you mentioned before about choosing films that you thought were all age friendly, and then at the end a parent threw their drink at you, or was yelling at you concerning how inappropriate the film was, which just means that films are subjective. And I think we talked about this before we started the conversation officially, about my interpretation of the size about things. And I was wondering what your interpretation was, because I'm interested to know, just because I have my vision of it, but
Yep.
There was a lot going on in there as well, which is interesting because it was set in the middle. It was just very remote, and it was only 2 characters. So I'm just interested to know what your thoughts are on that movie.
I'd call the chair a character by the end of the movie. I'd be like, that thing gets its own mind.
Oh, that 3 characters, yeah.
But I don't know I don't know what's going on in that movie. I'm actually enjoy hearing other people's interpretations. But today, when I had rewatched it, because I hadn't seen it for about 5-6 months, it's really when the father said, son, don't be something like, don't be dishonest about the size of things. And I was like, oh, he actually says the title. I didn't catch that the first time or a couple times I've watched it. And so I thought that maybe that was a clue that the father sees the son misinterpreting something in the real world and misjudging the size of things. But the father doesn't come across as too much. He's a well-meaning, loving father, but he's a little bit, I don't know. He seems very set in his ways, and he's not going to change. And so, short answer is, I have no clue, but I was leaning towards the fact that leaning towards the interpretation of saying that the son has his view of things, and the father has his view of things. They don't align, and the son wants to get rid of the thing that they don't. It could be a source of contention later on, or even a threat to the house, because the son looks at that chair, and the tension of whether that chair is just going to grow exponentially and pop the roof off the cabin is there, but you don't know if that's imagined or if it's not. But I really appreciate the fact that, I don't know, And I mean, you had your read on it, which was somewhat
Yes.
perspective. Yes. Is what I thought, right?
Yeah, my interpretation was that the son was placing too much emphasis on the chair, which is it's just a thing. It's just a material thing according to the father. So the more attention and importance he placed on the chair, I felt like the bigger it got. And there was one point in the short where the father was looking at his hands, and I thought that his hands were getting bigger. So I'm thinking that maybe the father was placing his importance on his own hands, because to him, that's what he uses for work. That's what he uses to cook, to feed his kids, to replace or repair the roof when there's a leakage. So his hands are his livelihood. But
that's a great interpretation.
Yeah, I can go on.
No, but that the perspective of like that he's he's giving too much importance to the chair, and it's growing in his mind. I mean, that's different than mine, and that's, I like that. That's, now my perspective is enhanced by combining yours and mine. And I'm glad you brought up that scene about him looking at his hands, and the saw is buried in the mud, kind of below the mud, and there's scissors are in the mud too. And I'm going, scissors and a saw, and they're kind of like hadn't been touched in a while, and he's staring at his hands. I'm going, you got me. I'm not sure. I didn't see his hands getting bigger, but maybe I wasn't paying attention enough. But I was like, I forgot that scene altogether, and I'm going, what does that mean? Holy cow! So, but I like being bothered. I like thinking about it right now, and that's more I can say about the Marvel film after I've watched it. Is that right now you bringing that up? I'm like, yeah, that's right. What was that about? How did that contribute to the narrative? And what did it enhance, or did it detract, or was the filmmaker just being like, oh, I'm going to stick in random scenes to make you feel disoriented, and you're not going to figure out anything. I'm going to make sure of it.
And it's interesting that that you brought up the Marvel film, because I feel like that short was only 8 to 10 minutes, and I'm still thinking about it the day after. Whereas Marvel, as I'm like you, I do enjoy their eye candy for me in more ways than one, because of all the superheroes. But at the end of the day, like, I really don't remember what the storyline was, other than a lot of the cities got blown up.
Right, and especially when they're doing the 3 series ones there, the 3 in a row, and my son's going, Dad, no, they didn't find that yet. Loki hasn't even been introduced yet. I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't figure this out. Like, everyone's just going to beat up everybody eventually, or fall in love, or whatever. It's all fun, whatever. But just don't ask me to recite what the story was. I'll never get it right. So.
Okay, well, I think that brings us to a halt there, unless there are any other questions. But beyond that, I just want to thank Eric for coming along and talking to us tonight. My co-presenter, Karina. I think we had a great discussion. And as I said, I will be passing on the information about juries for the next Providence Children's Film Festival. I'll put it into the comment section of our Facebook page, our Feria Facebook page, so that people could follow up with you. And I hope that they do, and so that we can get more of our Latino population and all the people of our community to be represented. So thank you very much. Thanks for everybody who is watching and listening now, and those who will be watching and listening in the future to this conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Please take a look at the other Feria events we have coming up, and come along and join us on Saturday the 25th at Knight Memorial Library for an in-person event. Between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. We look forward to seeing you all in person then. So in the meantime, thank you everyone for participating. Thank you.
Thank you. It
Thank
was
you.
nice talking.